Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're diving deep into one of the most powerful and, let's be honest, one of the most controversial tools in the Indian Constitution. It's called Article 356, but you probably know it by its more famous name, President's Rule.
So let's just jump right in with a pretty shocking question. Can a national government, the central government, actually fire a state government that has been democratically elected by its own people? I mean, it sounds pretty extreme, right? But the answer is yes, under very specific circumstances, it can.
And the power to do that comes from this thing, Article 356. Basically, it's a provision that lets the President of India, on the advice of the central government, take direct control of a state if it's believed that the state government can no longer function according to the Constitution. So how does this actually work? And more importantly, how has it been used over the years? Let's get into it.
Okay, here's our roadmap for today. First, we'll look at what this emergency power was supposed to be for. Then we'll see how it was misused for decades, really becoming a political tool. After that, we'll dive into the one crucial court case that changed everything. We'll break down the new rules that came out of that case. And finally, we'll ask the big question, has this power really been tamed?
All right, first up, the original idea. Article 356 was never meant to be some kind of political weapon. The people who wrote the Constitution thought of it as a safety valve. It was supposed to be an emergency measure, something you'd only use in the absolute rarest of cases, like a complete breakdown of law and order in a state.
And when that safety valve is pulled, the results are, well, they're sweeping. The elected state government is gone, just dismissed. The state's assembly, its legislature, is either put on ice, suspended, or dissolved completely. Suddenly, the national parliament in Delhi is making laws for that state. And the governor, who is appointed by the center, basically becomes the de facto ruler. It's a total takeover. But that whole safety valve idea, that didn't really last. What was supposed to be a tool for emergencies quickly turned into a political weapon, one that the party in power at the center could use to dismiss state governments run by their rivals.
And you can see a really clear pattern emerge. It arguably started with that controversial dismissal in Kerala back in '59, but soon it just spiraled into this tit-for-tat cycle. In 1977, the Janata government comes to power and dismisses 9 Congress-led states at once. 3 years later, in 1980, Congress is back, and what do? The exact same thing. They dismiss 9 non-Congress governments. This whole cycle of political payback eventually led to the 1989 dismissal of the S.R. Bommai government in Karnataka, and that single act would set the stage for a legal battle that changed everything.
And just to put a number on this so you can grasp the scale, between 1950 and 1994, President's Rule was imposed over 100 times. That works out to more than twice a year, every single year. That is a far, far cry from the rare and exceptional emergency measure it was supposed to be.
So this couldn't just keep going on, right? Something had to give. And the challenge finally came from S.R. Bommai, that dismissed chief minister from Karnataka. He took his case all the way to the Supreme Court, and the judgment that came out of it became this huge defining moment for India's federal structure.
Then, in 1994, the court made its decision, and it was a landmarked verdict. Now, they didn't get rid of Article 356 altogether, but what they did was build these powerful fences all around it. They completely changed the rules of the game for how and when this power could ever be used again. The era of just using it whenever you wanted, it was over.
So what were these new rules? Well, you can think of them as constitutional guardrails. The Supreme Court basically stepped in and said, okay, we're putting up these barriers to stop the government from just driving this power off a cliff. It created a whole new framework.
And here's the absolute heart of that judgment, broken down into 4 key ideas. First, judicial review. The president's decision is no longer the final word. The courts can now step in and check if there was a legitimate reason. Second, and this one is huge, the floor test. The only place to prove if a government has a majority is on the floor of the assembly, through a vote, not in the governor's office based on their personal opinion. Third, suspend, don't dissolve. You can't just get rid of the state assembly right away. You can only suspend it until the parliament signs off on the move. And finally, the court gave itself an incredible power. If it finds a dismissal was unconstitutional, it can literally restore the old government back to power. It can turn back the clock.
And the court wasn't just making this up out of thin air. This thinking was totally in line with what expert commissions have been saying for years. Both the Sarkaria Commission and later the Panchi Commission said the same things. Use this power sparingly. Make the floor test the only real test, and for goodness sakes, make sure the governor acts like a neutral umpire, not a political player for the central government.
So the big question is, after the Bommai judgment put all these new rules in place, did it actually work?
I mean, has this incredibly powerful constitutional tool really been tamed? Let's take a look at the legacy.
The impact was, well, profound. The use of Article 356 just plummeted. The judgment gave a massive boost to federalism, making state governments feel a lot more secure, and the courts have shown they mean business. In 2016, they jumped in to reverse President's rule in both Uttarakhand and Arunachal Pradesh, putting those governments back in power and proving that the Boumai principles were alive and kicking. It really started to shift the culture towards something called constitutional morality.
And if you're a visual person, the numbers just make it crystal clear. Look at the chart. The average number of times President's rule was used per year before 1994 compared to after, it's a dramatic drop. Those judicial guardrails actually worked. They forced the center to think twice, or maybe 3 or 4 times, before reaching for this political weapon.
And that really brings us to our final thought for today. The S.R. Boumai case was, without a doubt, a monumental check on government power. And it left us with a stronger, more resilient federal system. But here's the thing about constitutional powers. They're only as limited as the institutions willing to guard them. So we'll leave you with this question to chew on. Is this power truly tamed for good, or is it just dormant, waiting for the right political moment to be misused all over again? Thanks for joining us.